Payments podcast from Bottomline Technologies.
This year's AFP event, that's the Association for Financial Professionals, like the vast majority of conferences in 2020, moved to a wholly virtual experience. With 2 weeks chock full of sessions from some of the biggest names in the industry, this episode will review the top 5 highlights that you should be aware of from this year's discussions. Hello, I'm Rich Williams, host of the Payments Podcast, and with me today is Alana Streit, General Manager of North American Payments at Bottomline, and of course an attendee of this year's AFP event. Hi Alana, thanks for joining us today and a very warm welcome onto the show for the first time.
Hi Rich, great to be here. Thanks so much.
No, not a problem at all. Now, AFP2020 came with the tagline, Virtually Together. How do you personally feel the virtual event went this year? And indeed, did it live up to this spirit of togetherness?
Yeah, virtual is tough. Really, things are hard for all of us these days, and you definitely can't expect to replace what an in-person conference was and the togetherness of an in-person conference with online and virtual. You have to create a whole new playbook on where you're going to operate, right? And think about it differently. But AFP did a really great job this year. I was impressed. I thought the schedule worked well. I liked the format. The technology worked great. But it wasn't so much about networking like it usually is. It was more about learning. I thought of it that way, and I know my team did as well. We got an opportunity to spend a lot more time in the sessions than we used to be able to. We were always on the convention floor, lots of busy days, breakfast till drinks after dinner, right? So that certainly was harder, but I still learned a lot and really enjoyed it. So happy to share some highlights with everyone listening out there today.
Thanks, Alana. That leads us very nicely on to our next question, which is, of course, the main topic of today's episode. So what were your particular highlights from the event and the particular sessions that you attended? Let's begin with the first key one for you, please.
Yeah, for sure. The first highlight, and not surprising, B2B payments are still way too hard. Way too hard for everyone. I've been building payment software for over 20 years now, and I've seen it change a lot, and I've lived through a lot of pain, blood, sweat, and tears of building software and payments and B2B payments in particular, and the high risk nature of them, and the balance between speed and efficiency, but preventing fraud and risk and compliance. And it's just still too hard. But I see that the market is now, I think, even more open to change, and maybe the global pandemic, which is a lens over everything right now, maybe that is really causing some of that. And that was definitely talked about in almost all the sessions. But the corporate voices need to get involved. Don't just let the banks make all the decisions, right? Integration is still too hard. We try things like ISO 2022, which fundamentally was supposed to make things easier and more consistent, but it's not. Everybody implements it a little bit differently. And if corporates don't get more involved, they're going to bear the brunt of the cost. It's their systems, it's their processes, it's their people, and I believe they really need to lean in. I believe they'll be leaning in and asking more and more of fintechs instead of their banks. I heard that a lot as well, and that excites me. And excited about what's to come in our industry.
We've certainly been banging the drum of not leaving everything to the banks in previous episodes, and I think that shift and looking towards fintechs and corporates to take and bear some of the brunt of the responsibility is really important. So, in the spirit of learning rather than simply networking and having a few sneaky drinks afterwards, what are some more highlights from you, please, from this year's event?
Yeah. Data is king, and I did want to talk about one specific session that was really interesting. But first, data, it's the most valuable asset on earth. I hear people say it's like oil, right? But it must be refined. And so data science is now at the center of so much, and everyone should be investing in data science, period. It's the old adage of garbage in, garbage out, and every session I attended was about you've got to have good data. And how do you find the data and cleanse it and make sure I've got a centralized customer database, all of those things, right? Is it accurate? Well, there was a really interesting use case, a session with Accenture. They have built a cash inventory optimizer, and they've applied data science, essentially, and artificial intelligence to cash flow forecasting. They're a huge global organization, right? I think they operate in 60 countries. And their goal was to reduce idle cash and get it centralized into their main bank, their central bank, and then have it work better for them, right? And they think of cash as inventory. And they use data science and predictive analytics. I think they said 12 different models that their data scientists built with just off the shelf or open source technology to understand what they really needed to have on hand in every country to run that operation and reduce their average cash on hand, centralize it, and took so much more of the pain of the analysis from the people and the time-consuming pain to figure that out, and then solved a pretty significant cash flow forecasting problem with artificial intelligence. So I thought it was really interesting. And I have to keep saying it, everyone should be investing in data, a data strategy, and leveraging data science and the tools that are out there to make it work better for you. And Accenture clearly has done that in their cash flow forecasting.
I totally agree. I think the old adage used to be cash is king. Well, I think now
Yes.
we're all agreed that data is king, and
data is king.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
those predictive analytics are things that we have to start relying on, and clearly they have to mature so that we can trust them and they become more and more accurate. But it's very encouraging to hear that was a key takeaway from you. What else can you share with us, Alana?
Maybe not as interesting, but definitely something that software should solve is bank fee analysis. Our corporates have 10 plus banks, easily 10 plus banking relationships, could be 50 different accounts, right? And lots of different services from all those banks. And banks love to charge fees. And bank fee analysis is way too difficult. There were specific sessions on people talking about it's really a full-time job, and it's kind of it's a boring job. Who wants to spend their job analyzing bank analysis statements? And I think software and technology should be easily applied to solve bank fee challenges, right? Decipher it, make sure you're utilizing the services that you're paying for, uncovering fees for unneeded services. It can be an eye-opening exercise. There are a number of sessions on the methodology that you can take to do bank fee analysis. I'm a big proponent of apply software to that, right? It's a high return on investment. There should be a consortium of data that not only compares your own fees, but to others. I think of, like, most of us, we used to travel, right? And you probably know who the points guy is, who analyzes rewards programs like credit cards and other travel programs. Why can't you do that with bank fee analysis, right? We need to be taking a page from the consumer world when it comes to B2B, and make it easier and use software to do that. I attended some really interesting sessions on that, and it definitely has piqued my interest for future functionality we'll be providing to our customers as well.
Certainly, and from my experience of been working for Bottomline and speaking to a lot of our corporate customers, it's often met with a question of with the response, of, well, we just don't know what we're being charged for today,
right?
And it's very hard to aggregate and find a best value and streamlined solution if you can't see the problem you're trying to solve in the first place. So again, a very important topic, and glad to hear that was discussed there.
Absolutely, it shouldn't be that difficult, right? I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more. What's your fourth highlight from the session, please?
Well, we've been talking about payments, but I would be remiss to not talk about receivables. Receivables. I attended a session on the receivables journey, and I think this was Cintas, who made a pretty significant investment in their journey to streamline their receivables. Receivables are still extremely check heavy, right? Now with COVID, people are definitely trying to speed up their shift to digital. But receivables are still very check heavy, but they're definitely seeing it shifting, and shifting uh, the right way. But when shifting to digital, it actually makes applying receivables even harder. I didn't appreciate that, like, less than 10% of B2B ACH payments have the remittance data needed to apply receivables, and it's actually easier with a check, which is
Astounding.
definitely someone who is so passionate about electronic payments. And I grew up as a wire transfer girl, which is funny. I'm passionate about electronic payments. It kind of boggles my brain. So they spoke of the substantial portion of manual work in AR departments, almost forensic work, to apply ACH payments. And again, such an opportunity to solve that with technology. There's a way to solve any problem. It depends on, especially with technology, depends on the time and investment you want to put into it. But I know there's a way to solve that. I know there are some vendors out there that have solved it for people. And so I heard some interesting stories about a journey for lead treasury experts to streamline their receivables, and that's where I think the industry needs to focus and go as well.
hmm And
Yeah.
again, we think of it as a given that these things should be more achievable, given the move to a more widespread digital society and digital
Yep.
landscape. But it really is astounding that we have to go into these things, as you say, in forensic detail. And how do we solve these problems? Well, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, people, process, technology. It always seems to come
Yes.
back to those three key things.
Yes. Yes.
Let's wrap up then, Alana, with your final highlight from this year's AFP event.
Yeah. AFP is always brings some really interesting keynotes, and I made a point to attend the majority of the keynotes, and I love that. This one that I wanted to talk about, Jim Cates interviewed Daniel Pink. He is a New York Times author, best-selling author, and he wrote a book called The Science of Perfect Timing, I think, and that was the name of the session. And you would think his topics would be common sense, but I really learned a lot. And I know it might not be payments related, but today, in our work from home, never leave your home office, and all the stories we're being told about, plan out your day and schedule your day, even though you're just getting up from your bed and walking to your office and turning on the computer and all the devices and not stopping. I thought it was really interesting. I like that AFP brought him um, to their sessions. What I loved is he talked about all the studies around people are either larks, they're early birds, or they're night owls, or they're the in betweeners. So everyone has kind of a cycle throughout their day. And almost all of us, because 80% of us are either like morning birds or kind of in betweeners. There's very, very few night owls. But most of us go through a peak and then a trough and then a recovery every single day. So you might notice it at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You start you're burnout. You're just not operating with the same cognitive ability you did when you woke up in the morning, right? I'm definitely a morning person. My husband hates it, but I am. So your cognitive abilities don't remain static throughout the course of the day. And that change is really much more extreme than you realize. And he quoted a lot of studies around, in hospitals, a lot of the issues are seen in the late afternoon. So if you can avoid going to the hospital in the late afternoon, you should definitely do that. Right? It was really interesting. But what I loved is how I'm going to apply it is that certain tasks that you do throughout the day, you should think about that task and plan them based on whether you're in your peak or your trough or your recovery, right? So your analytical work should happen during your peak. You have limited distractions, and that's when that should happen. In your trough, that should be your administrative work. Fill out your T&E form, right? That's your administrative work. And then in your recovery, your mood may be back up, but your vigilance isn't. And that's the best time to do like problem solving or brainstorming. And so when you schedule meetings, you should not just think about, hey, they've got an hour free on their calendar. You should think about, what am I trying to accomplish during this time? And when should I schedule it? So I thought that was really interesting. His statistics were clear across, like, in the business world, education and higher education, in healthcare. He had so many interesting stories, and so I've actually already ordered his book. So really interesting. I thought it was a great keynote that AFP brought for their attendees, and I enjoyed it and learned a lot.
Well, that certainly is an interesting final highlight to end on, and although not entirely geared towards finance, it's something that I'm sure we could apply to any aspect of our lives. Interestingly, right. One thing I heard from an internal colleague of mine this week was that I think we began this lockdown working from home, and a lot of us have found ourselves living from work.
Yes.
So I think trying to adopt some new methodologies and mindsets into the way we go about our day could have some pretty profound benefits.
I love that. That's what I'm doing. I'm living from work.
Well, you can take that one with you. Alana, thanks so much for sharing your viewpoints from the ground level. And I'm sure this gives our listeners some topics to ponder and digest. And I hope you'll join us again sometime in the future.
Thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate it.
So on the subject of our listeners, we've also released an episode during AFP on the key considerations for the accounts payable function with Tristan Thompson from UMB Bank, which of course is well worth a listen if you haven't done so already. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today, but in the meantime, you can listen to more episodes on all things payments at the touch of a button using your preferred provider. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate the show, or leave a comment as you wish, and we'll see you all next time.
Payments Podcast from Bottomline Technologies.